I feel in my experience, men are faster at making those decisions than we are, because we are like, well, I'm used to these emotions. I'm used to this stuff. And I need to know that I'm safe with you, because when I'm attaching to you, I'm really going to attach to you, because my hormones are going to kick in, especially if we get intimate.
Yes.
My hormones are going to kick in, and I'm not going to see clearly. So I need as much time as I can to pace this so I can see clearly who I'm dealing with. And once I know it's safe, we can then unify in some way. And then I can totally, succumb, what's the word? Succomber in French. Like...
Succumb, yes.
Yeah, just like surrender to you. Exactly. Surrender to this container that feels safe. But for us, when we've dated and we've been hurt and, that kind of stuff, it takes a bit more time. Welcome back. We are on today with my guest, Jerry Souter, on the Tour for This Shit podcast. I'm your host, Angie Sorensen. If you like the show, please don't forget to give it a 5-star rating and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. Subscribe for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Radio FM, Amazon Music, however you're listening to this podcast right now. The more you do that, the more it helps new listeners discover this show. So I'd really, really appreciate it if you did that. Thank you so much. So in today's episode with Jerry Souter, who is back for a second time, we are covering how to be, as a cis woman, how to date safely, both physically and emotionally. We cover recognizing red flags, how to discern between love bombing versus when a healthy man knows very early on that you're the one, being the muse and not the mother. Also, what are feminine and masculine energies and how that's not gender specific. And also how to be able to just accept our fierce side when we are feminine, and how basically being angry at times is very acceptable part of that too. So, how to stand your ground when you're a very feminine woman. So, without further ado, let's begin. Welcome, Jerry. Welcome back.
Hi, Angie. It's so nice to be back on.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. So today's going to be slightly different to what we spoke about last time. But I'm really excited to go into this, because what we are going to discuss is basically how to date and love safely for women.
Yes.
Which, I think is it's definitely an important topic, the feeling of safety whilst we're being feminine and all that stuff. So before we dive in, Jerry, can you please introduce yourself, where you live and what you do?
Yes, I'm Jerry Souter. I'm a sex, love and relationship coach. And I support women who are either single or in relationships that they're not quite happy in, to clear the way for the relationship they really want. And at the moment, I'm from the UK, at the moment living in Switzerland.
And I just remembered something when we last spoke, is that, you went through your own fair share of a journey of, toxicity and how you approach relationships. And there was a lot of growth for you and learning curves that you had to go through before you actually got to where you are today. So when you are actually talking about this, it's sort of from a place of, I've actually been there. Like, I'm not, it doesn't feel like a place of judgment when we were talking about it last time, I remember. Would you say that's an accurate memory?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it's really important, anything that I share with others, whether it's with my clients or just, on the internet, it's really important that a lot of it are things that I've either been through personally, or I've worked with clients who have been through these experiences. So it's kind of like you say, from a space of having been through it myself. Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of what I share comes from, my own personal experiences.
And can you just give us, in terms of, that segment of what gives you the right to talk about this? Could you, two things. One is, what sort of your certification, how you became a coach. And two, That's pure curiosity. What is your status? I mean, I know, but for listeners who haven't heard you before.
For the audience, yes. So I'll go into my status first. So I recently got married. It was in March.
Yay, congratulations.
So, yes, thank you so much. It's been wonderful, especially, after the journey I've been on, after, most of my adult life being in very destructive relationships, to have met my husband and being in a very healthy, happy relationship now. I do feel as though I'm sort of extra thankful for it, and just really kind of appreciative. And so that's where I'm at in terms of what gives me the right to talk about this topic. So yes, I do have the professional qualifications and background as well as the personal experience. So I qualified as a sex, love and relationship coach with a teacher called Layla Martin. For those of you who don't know, she's sort of a pioneer, I would say, in this industry in sort of sex, love and relationships. And she uses a very holistic approach that includes a lot of non-traditional modalities. So it isn't just talk coaching. I also use things like meditation or visualization and kind of going into the subconscious. And I did that training in 2019, and I've been coaching now for nearly 2 years. And before that, I did 2 years of studying counseling. And I was also a yoga teacher, and so I've been kind of involved with this type of work for quite a while now.
And then before we go into the topic today, just because I think this is going to be really interesting, especially because we're going to talk about dating safely and, how we are accountable to our choices and how we are responsible as well for, for our reality a lot of the time, for what's going on. And so just because for those who haven't listened to, and it's because I feel like this is just I just feel like I remember when you told me about what I'm about to say, it's like, I was just like, wow, like she, you really were in a place that, you've done so much, like you've done so much headway and you're now, in a happy and a safe relationship from what I remember us talking last time. But was it what was it called, Love Addicts, that you were part of?
Yeah, so it was, after...
Love Addict Anonymous, sorry, was it something?
Yeah. So it was kind of, in the beginning when I started to have the awareness that I was repeating these really unhealthy patterns in my relationships and that I was the common denominator in all of them, I was like, okay, maybe there's some patterns that I need to do some inner work around and investigate. And so as, for me, I'm someone who I really need to have a lot of information and like understand why things are the way they are. So I did a lot of reading and I went to therapy. And one of the things that I found was Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. And that was really it was supportive for me in the beginning to be in a room full of people, having been through the same experiences and feeling, because at the time I felt as though I wasn't in control of my behavior. I didn't feel as though I had any power, that I was just, ending up in these really destructive relationships and I was acting in destructive ways and I believed that I couldn't change it. And so that was where that community was helpful. And after a while, it didn't feel right for me to keep identifying with that label. But it was in the beginning stages when I was trying to understand myself and what was going on, it was very helpful.
Yeah. I think it always feels good to know that, one, you're not going through it alone. 2, there's someone else who understands. 3, there's a place you can go and vent to. A bit like when I go to therapy, I'm like, just the fact that I know if I start therapy, I'm feeling better because I know there's going to be someone I can speak to. Things, like in an impartial way, who's going to be there and who's just not, there's that non-judgment factor, So yeah, I can see how, how that would have been also very useful at the time for you.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It was, and exactly like you say, for me, the first time I went to therapy, I told my therapist things that I'd never told anyone. And even that in itself was hugely supportive in my journey.
Exactly. Yeah. So, well, thank you for this, Jerry. So, okay, now we can stop. No, joking. Okay. So, to start off with, on on how to date safely. And I'm going to go, because obviously this is such a big topic, I'm going to go for like, how to date safely for women, and definitely like cis women, because there's a whole other range of safety issue when it comes to trans and all that kind of stuff. So it's a whole that it adds a whole other level. So I just want to focus for now, just and be very general, and that there's going to be nuances, I know, but if we just to start really general, as for like cis women to date safely, I feel like we maybe like first need to define and understand the difference between wounded and a healthy man, because I find that a wounded and unaware men are just as toxic as wounded and unaware women, and we sort of attract each other. So I feel like if we can start to see what is wounded, what is toxic, it kind of helps us to put a little bit of perspective on the conversation.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that lens, and it's important for me to say I'm a cis heterosexual woman. So of course this is coming from my lens and my perspective from that angle of dating. And I do think it is really important to have that awareness around not only, our own behaviors, but like what do I need to be mindful of with dating partners when I'm going out there and dating? And there's so many different layers to safety, right? So there's the aspect of like the physical safety. So like making sure that, a friend like knows where you are, that like, that kind of like making sure that you're meeting in a public space for the first time. And then there's kind of like the emotional safety.
And the public space, by the way, we don't mean parks. Especially in the evenings.
Yes.
You'd be surprised the amount of, in lockdown, a man would be like, oh yeah, I'll be like, oh, we go for a walk in the park, because that was the only kind of date scenario, or walk, in residential areas. But then they'd be like scheduling for later in the afternoon when it's about to go dark, and I'd be like, no, I can't meet you at that time. You can meet earlier in the day. So like public space, but let's not put ourselves in a park at night, and some women don't even realize that. I know friends who wouldn't have thought about that, which, frightens me as a woman. That they're not thinking. So yeah. So okay. So that just was a little bracket I wanted to add.
Yes, and that's exactly the kind of detail. And honestly, I was one of those women. Like when I was in my early 20s or like late teens, it was it wasn't something I was mindful or aware of, and something that I have my clients do. And sometimes it feels as though it's kind of micro and it's going into a lot of detail. But I have them create a dating plan and just get really clear on what are my red flags. And it's kind of, because it is different for all of us. I don't think there's any kind of generalization. Of course, there are some things, like you say, not meeting people in a park at nighttime. But then there's kind of like the other layers of, well, for some women, it's important that the partner replies to their message within 24 hours. For some women, like a few days is fine. So we all have those different requirements. And then it's just getting really clear on, in order for me to feel safe, what do I need?
Yeah.
What do I need? And this is a question, honestly, that most people don't ask themselves. And because we're so used to being in environments where, at a physical level, we might feel safe, but at an emotional level or a subconscious level, we're not necessarily feeling safe. And we override it over and over again, and we find excuses for it. And it's kind of these generalizations of like, well, that's just what men are like, or all of this kind of stuff. And we excuse the behaviors. And that's when it's really important to have clear boundaries of like, this is what safety is for me and this is what it isn't. And if I encounter something unsafe, then I need to take a step to remove myself from that. Can I
sort of comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because that's something I thought I was going to mention a bit later, but I feel like this is like, with what you were saying, I think like would be a good time to bring this up, is because obviously you mentioned about emotional safety, and some people don't have a plan, whether they have it written down or like very clear boundaries within themselves. They've been doing for years and years and years, and I feel like this this plan, this feeling of safety. It's almost like having this container for ourselves, a container for us to feel safe, for us to actually be able to be feminine and have fun and relax and be able to trust. It's not just having a partner that is safe to be around with, but is when we're single and when we're dating, is to have things that are put in place, like the village around us. And the way I would describe is anything from, for me to not feel all over the place like a headless chicken, I have things in place. So my rents, my bills are all coming out, automatically from my bank account, like set up as a direct debit, like we call it in the UK. So it comes out automatically. I don't have to think about that. If I had to go around, worry about it, I wouldn't sleep as well at night, and I probably would forget. And then all of a sudden rent is due, or and it's late. And the same thing with dating is like, okay, but what makes me feel safe is like, one, the guy is not married, or he's been divorced for a certain amount of years, or that, like you said, he replies, he's consistent, all these things. And it's like, because for me, it would be the same as, the reason why I was saying this boat or a container is because if I was to go onto a boat and I was like, I'm just going to go where the current takes me, I'm going to end up somewhere. I have no idea where it is on the map, and I'll be just like lost, and that would be reckless for me to do. Whereas if you know that, okay, well, if the wind goes in, blows north or goes this way or does this, or if the water does this is what I need to do. And there's like a methodology almost behind it, because once you have that methodology behind, and you know what's going on and you know where you're going. So let's say you want to get married, for example, or you want to have children, or you just want to be with a partner, with no other commitment, just, no children, no marriage, but you know what you want, then you can relax and enjoy the ride. You can relax and enjoy looking at the sea, the ocean, the sunset, the sunrise. But without it, we go around and we'll feel anxious because we're being taken by the current. And then any man, whether he has good or bad intention, is going to take us on his agenda. And then all of a sudden we forgot ourselves in this relationship. So that was a big bracket. I probably like this long. Sorry, I was talking for hours there. But you know what I mean?
No, that resonates so much for me. And, as soon as you said the word reckless, I was like, yep, that was me. And, my teenage years, throughout all of my 20s. And this is why the inner work on ourselves is so important, because I was coming from a space of, because of past experiences and trauma and childhood experiences, where I was so desperate for validation that anyone who would give it to me, like you say, I would then be on their boat and on their journey, and I would be taken along regardless of whether, well, I didn't even know what my requirements or my standards were. So it was just kind of like, okay, well, he likes me, so, I'm going to like him back. And so what happened is I ended up in relationships with people for quite a long time, where at the end I was like, I didn't even like this person.
And you see, I think that is where, because like the question was how to recognize wounded men or unhealthy men, because that is as toxic as wounded and unhealthy women. So I think in the sense, like, when part of like not having a plan and just getting on the boat of the first one who arrives, or falling for someone, too so soon, if we haven't worked on ourselves, if we don't know what we want and what makes us feel safe, then that is us being wounded as women as well. That's us actually coming from a wounded place. Because once we've done the work on ourselves, when we can recognize, we can almost smell a man who is actually not good for us. We recognize this because we've done the work. And then a man who's actually more healthy, we may still fall faster or whatever, but it would be with a better choice. And again, I'm still trying to figure that bit out, because sometimes I still don't really trust whether am I like, I have better taste now, I would say, for men. You know what I mean? Like I really love it when a man is good to me and wants to spend time with me, takes me out and wants to make me happy. That is a turn on so much of a turn on now, whereas before it used to be boring. So I'm hoping now that when I actually feel attraction for that kind of guy, it is actually coming from a much better, healthier place, you know? But yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to give a few examples, and I might give some personal experiences as well, just to make it a bit more tangible.
Yes.
But also, I do want to caveat these examples with saying, because one of the things when I'm supporting women to create boundaries, and that's one of the things around, you know, like recognizing unhealthy men, because it's like one thing recognizing them, and then what do you do? But it's sort of like recognizing, and they have this, a lot of the fears that I hear are, well, then I'm never going to meet anyone, or like, what if I put my walls up too much? And then there's this kind of like opposite spectrum. So with all of these examples, it's just to say that, of course, you know, always kind of like, it has to be looked at an individual situation, but there are some things that for me, I find generally are red flags. So a few examples of when you can recognize that someone is unhealthy is if, for example, you've stated a boundary. Like, I don't know, for example, you know, for me, when I first met my husband, I had a lot going on. I was like working 3 jobs. I was doing my coaching certification.
Wow,
and I was very, you know, I didn't have a lot of time. And I'm very organized and planned, and he's very spontaneous. And so in terms of like, and we had to like navigate that because he would want to meet up last minute. And one of the things that I had to be mindful of in my own self is like, okay, you know, I'm not going to override my own boundary of needing a bit of notice. If I didn't have anything on, then I could be like, okay, I'll meet him in that spontaneity. But for me, a red flag would have been if he had consistently overridden that boundary.
Yes.
So if I had stated, you know, listen, I've got a lot on right now from a really anchored space. I've got a lot on right now, and I would really, really appreciate it if, you know, we could at least plan things a few days in advance so I can like plan my schedule because I would love to see you. And then if he goes, you know, either doesn't respond at all or says, okay, and then the next day messages me and says, can I meet you in an hour?
Yeah, that's someone who doesn't care or doesn't listen to at all and just want that's someone who's on their own agenda.
Yes.
And then the issue is that if we carry on seeing them, and you know, it's like one, you can see a behavior, but if they keep doing it and then you keep staying in it, that's when, well, that's both are wounded and have no boundaries really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one kind of like indicator of, okay, this person doesn't have the capacity to respect boundaries, or they don't have the capacity to hear my needs for whatever reason. Like, it doesn't matter. And then it's kind of like, okay, you know, this is possibly, you know, we don't want to go around like diagnosing people, but it's just like knowing, okay, well, this is not someone I want to engage with, or this isn't someone I want to date or be in an intimate relationship with. Mm-hmm. And I think that's like kind of one of the really, really clear indicators. And then I also think for me, it's like examples of, you know, kind of lack of clarity, or for themselves not knowing what they want. So you were mentioning earlier, you know, when you're kind of in that space of you know what you want. For me, I knew I wanted to get married. I wanted to experience that commitment and have that. So I was being very honest in my dating experiences. And I was just saying, like, right from the beginning, like, I want to get married in the near future. And a lot of women have a fear of doing this because they think it means the guy is going to like disappear.
No, I think that's great. Like, let them deselect themselves.
Exactly.
Like, for me, it's like, I'm the same as you now. I'm like, I'm not interested in being somebody's girlfriend. Like, I'm just too old for that crap. Like, I don't even see it. Like, for me, everyone is different, right? But for me, I don't see any value or safety in it at all. Like, it's almost like something has clicked in me. And so I do say, I don't even bring up marriage. I say, you know, boyfriend, girlfriends means nothing. Like, you know, if it comes up in conversation, and I can see how, you know, and you know, actually often the man, they go, yeah, they agree, because they know as a man, like as a cis heterosexual man, they also know that it means nothing. It means nothing in front of the law. It means nothing in religion. Like, if he falls ill and only the nearest family can go and see him in hospital, I can't go in because I'm his girlfriend.
Yeah.
It means nothing. Like, I mean, it means something, obviously, because we get attached and we love them so much, right? But effectively, you can just, there is no commitment that helps you to grow in love and to learn how to love each other and to work through stuff. Now, boyfriend, girlfriend, you can just walk out from one second to the next. To me, now it has completely stopped meaning anything. I respect it for what it means for others, because it used to mean a lot to me. Obviously, you know, but yeah, and I'm like, if someone is not on board with that, I'm like, well, that's good. We don't need to be going on another date and waste each other's time.
Yes, exactly. And that for me is sort of an indicator. You know, one of the things that I really started recognizing when I was like dating and started recognizing men that were unhealthy was this kind of vagueness or unwillingness to meet my clarity. Yes. So it was kind of like they would be like, oh, well, you know, like I haven't really thought about getting married, you know, maybe one day, or, you know, it's only a piece of paper, or which is fine. They're entitled to those opinions, but like then we're not a match.
Okay, yeah. Well, listen, that thing with that piece of paper, I'm like, okay, guess what? Banknotes are a piece of paper. Leases are pieces of paper. Contracts are pieces of paper. I don't see anybody going up to court saying it was only a piece of paper. I don't need to owe rent to my landlord, or I can just burn 50,000 in cash because it's only paper.
Yes.
Exactly. I don't see them doing that. So, yeah, that argument to me is like, no, that means no. That's a cop out. That's a cop out.
And it's kind of, and one of the other really big indicators I saw was that, and this was a huge revelation for me because I was in a relationship and dating so many men that were doing this unhealthily, where their actions aren't matching their words.
Oh, yeah, it's such a turn off.
So it's like, I think there's like a term for it. I think it's like love bombing or something, where it's kind of like, you know, so I met a lot of men like this. And in the beginning, I would like, you know, I would get convinced by their words, and they would be like, you know, I'm going to do this for you, and I'm going to do that for you, and I want to be with you forever, and you're so beautiful, and you're this and that. And, you know, sending the flowers and like all of the big, you know, gestures. But then when I really needed them, then they weren't there.
Of course.
Or they were unreliable, or they wouldn't back up their big, big promises that they had all of the words for. They weren't backed up by action. And that for me was really an indicator of an unhealthiness, because it's like you don't have the conviction, you have all of the words, which you're trying to convince me with, and they're not being backed up by anything. They're meaningless, really.
And I feel like what all of those things boils down to is that it does not make us feel safe as a woman, right? And I think feeling safe is part of that boat, part of that container, part of like knowing what's happening. So, okay, let's say you're married and you stay at home mom. Let's say, you know, you just had babies, you're staying at home mom. So you're not currently working, you're looking after the babies. And so obviously he's the main provider, right? Financially. And him, for example, saying, you know, this is the budget for eating out, for ordering food in, for example, you know, like HelloFresh or whatever. You can tell I don't have kids. I'm not like HelloFresh. But I mean, you know, it's just, again, another example. But I say, okay, listen, the budget for HelloFresh is £50 a week. You know, the way we can treat ourselves outside of like, you know, making home cooked meals. You know, maybe that's, let's say for someone, that may not be a lot, £50 a week for HelloFresh for like as a treat for date night as a couple. But the thing is, that is actually a safety thing in terms of that is him telling you that he's in charge, like he understands how much money can be spent. Like if he said to you, oh, there's no budget. You know, you can order from the Ritz, you can order from Hilton, you know, order food. And all of, and again, he may be able to afford that. Maybe there is no budget. Maybe, you know, you marry someone who's extremely wealthy. But the thing is like, let's say if that's not the case, and all of a sudden it's like you have the bailiffs knocking on the door. You've overspent, you know, because the guy is not in charge of his boat. He doesn't know how much money can be spent. So him saying to you, well, that's the budget. That's actually him saying that's how much space we have to move in that boat, in that container. And I feel that's something that I sort of got to realize, like when a man takes me out for, let's say, you know, wines and dines me, you know, it doesn't matter the place, like, you know, the place that is where he decided that's what he can afford. And that's like, so you're free to choose what's on the menu in that place. You know, he's not saying, oh, I need to take her to the most impressive place that I cannot afford, because I would feel that energy from him. I would feel it's not safe. I would feel there's something lacking here. There's something not quite right. I feel like he's cringing every time I'm asking for a drink, or, you know what I mean? Like there will be something, and that's part of, am I making sense?
Yes. No, it makes sense to me. For what I'm hearing you say is just, you know, on both parts, like that, in order for there to be safety, there needs to be clarity around, you know, especially when you're living together, or if you're married, you have children, there needs to be clarity around like whose responsibility, you know, like this is this partner's responsibility, or this is what we do together, or this is what you do. And then in order to be able to feel safe, you need to know that your partner's going to step up and do the thing that he said he's going to do.
Yeah. And also sometimes that also means that, you know, like, I guess the reason why I was mentioning that budget thing is because sometimes they may feel like, oh, maybe a woman will feel like, well, that's a bit rigid, that's a bit stingy, but that's not. It's basically him trying to make sure that the family is protected and provided for, so that you can afford the next few months as well, you know?
Yeah. And of course, you know, we're accounting for people's humanity. We don't want to go into like perfectionism either. We all make mistakes. We're like all human. And it's kind of like, and it's just really, for me, you know, a sign of like health, as opposed to like the unhealthiness, is the willingness to have the conversations, the willingness to talk about, you know, you said you were going to do this thing and then you didn't do it. What happened? And to have those conversations. But if it's a recurring theme and if there's no consistency, then that's where, you know, it's just a red flag. And I did want to mention as well, you know, the big signs of unhealth. So of course, any physical violence, or, you know, I think emotional abuse can be a bit more, people don't recognize it as often because it's not as in your face, but it's kind of like the things like, I don't know, like the small comments like, oh, you know, have you thought about going to the gym more often? Or, you know, like the kind of like really sneaky little kind of comments where you're like, I don't think this person is healthy for me if they're like sort of criticizing in a really not very nice way. You know, that kind of like thing. So it's just kind of like the mindfulness of the ways it shows up in that way as well. And not just kind of like the more around like the physical safety as well. And kind of there's a lot of, I see this a lot kind of from unhealthy men, is like trying to undermine the woman that they're with, her confidence or whatever it might be, to get into a position of power.
Yeah, like do you have an example of like, you know, how they undermine? Actually, can I give you an example of what what I think would be undermining confidence?
Yes, yeah.
So, for example, you're at home, you watching TV, and then all of a sudden, you know, this music video comes up, and there's music, and you like the song, and then as a woman, you start dancing. You know, you start messing about, you start dancing because you know. I mean, I love dancing, so I'd be like dancing, and then if the guy sort of like almost don't want to look at you, or say, oh, you don't know how to dance. It's like, I find that as, it's like, it's not enough to make a big deal out of it, because I'm confident. I'm like, I know I'm not a dancer. Like, I don't care. I just want to enjoy myself. But it's like, it's almost like for me, because I've sat down and watched women dancing. You know, I've received dances from women, and there is nothing more. And this is not because women are better. It's not that. But I just find, you know, I'm not trying to come from like a superiority thing. It's not that. But I feel like watching a woman dance, and when she dances for you, is like, it's, to me, I feel honored. I see that beauty. There is something very special about it. And there's something, and I feel like when a man makes a snide comment around it or tries to put you down around it, to me, that's very wounded as a man. That's a man who's very wounded, because that's someone, he should actually be enjoying that there's even a woman that wants to be dancing in front of him. There's no one else watching. I'm not doing it for the hot guy who's at the bar. In your living room right now. And that to me is a big red flag. And it did actually turn out to be someone who kind of like, you know, it was almost something died inside of me in that, you know, over the following months. And I'm not doing that ever again. ever.
Yeah.
I'm not putting myself in that situation.
Yeah. And like as you were sharing that, like my heart just like I felt so much resonance because this has happened to me.
And I know it sounds petty, it sounds silly, but it's actually this aggression that it means. It's not what he said, it's what he means. You know what I'm saying? It's like really what it means, it represents.
And the thing is, because anyway, as women in our society, we're so conditioned to believe that we're not sexy enough, we're not skinny enough, we're not this enough, we're not beautiful enough, we're not young enough.
I am wonderful and beautiful. I think a lot of women are. And I'm like, and so for him to say it, I'm just like, this is disgusting. It's disgusting.
And it's kind of like what I found with those type of men. For me, like, my main insecurity about my physical appearance has always been my weight. And I found that actually men would pick up on that insecurity and then they would kind of use it against me to keep me small. So it wouldn't just be like outright like, oh, you know, you need to like lose some weight, but it would be things like, well, oh, do you not think that dress is like a bit too tight? Or like, you know, oh, maybe you shouldn't eat that thing. It would be those kind of things. Whereas now, you know, I still sometimes have those insecurities crop up. And now with my husband, it's like if I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like, oh, you know, it's been the pandemic and yeah, maybe I put on a bit of weight. And he's just like, you're beautiful as you are.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, that's like the indicator of health, because if he didn't think I was, like, why is he with me then?
Yeah, and do you know what the thing is like if you know I mean, I've had insecurities about my body as well, and I used to yo-yo a lot with my weight, and I think like for me it's like, you know, let's say if I am worried about it, and let's say if I wanted to lose weight because I'm not feeling good and my digestion is all over the place, and you know what I mean, then if the guy's like, you know what, if you feel, you know, do you want us to do something about it, like, you know, then if he comes with me, go for a walk, takes me, show me how to run. If he's like, you know what, let's go to the market, we buy some nice vegetable and fruits, we make some juice, you know what I mean? Like, then I'm like, that's someone who actually is listening to me, not feeling good about myself and wants to be my friend. Yeah. Obviously, not put, you know, if he says, okay, we got to put you on the juice cleanses. And I was just saying, I feel a bit bloated. That's not the same. Like, you can't just do that. But I think, you know, it's like that thing with those comments, and I guess I want to sort of like just iterate about that dancing example I was giving, is that, you know, that thing is it's like, it was sort of like representative of all the things that happened after, like, and how almost like how he was with me, how you know, how he listened, how he did not listen, how he is, all of those things. It's like to me, so I guess it was just like a red flag. That is not what destroyed the relationship per se, or how it made me feel afterwards, but it's like, is those things, like finding those little things is like a quality. It shows a quality in someone. It's like that guy who says to you, oh, you know, commenting on your weight and says maybe you should eat this and not eat that. That's a quality in him. It's a trait in them that we need to be aware of, because it's also a way of controlling you.
Yes, exactly.
It's those examples are control to keep you down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's an aggression in itself.
And it's creating an unhealthy power dynamic. And
yes,
of course, like no power dynamic between anyone is ever like 100%, but you want it to be more or less balanced.
Yeah.
And
you want to live in harmony with someone.
Yeah, exactly. And something, as you were like talking about that control, that came up in my mind as like a sign of an unhealthy man is jealousy. That was a really big one that I experienced as well, because it was like because it was all these conflicting messages that didn't make any sense. So there was the thing of like, oh, you need to lose weight, you're not as attractive as like the woman in the music video or whatever, and then, or the model or whatever. But then on the other hand, if we're going to a bar and then another man like approaches me and wants to buy me a drink or whatever because he hasn't seen you, and then it's a big drama and it's a big argument, and I'm it's my fault. So it's kind of that, like, it's that reaction, because I think an element of jealousy can be healthy, but it depends on how it's expressed.
Yeah.
And if it's expressed as a shaming and like, you know, kind of like slut shaming and, oh, you were doing this at the bar, that's why the man came to you, that kind of thing, then that's really unhealthy.
Yeah.
And it's a way of controlling, because now when that happens, when I go out with my husband, like, he kind of just laughs it off and he finds it like flattering. He's like, yeah, you know, my wife's attractive. Like, of course people are going to talk to her.
Exactly. I think that's the thing is like, the example you were giving about this other guy, not your husband, but the other guy, is that to me it smells of insecurity, like really profound insecurity. And don't get me wrong, I've been jealous too. I'm not here, but I'm not here. I'm not a saint.
No.
And I knew it came from insecurity. But even when I was jealous, I would never say that thing. I never said, "Oh, the other one is better looking than you," or like. I think that it's weird because when you are with someone and you love them and respect them, I want them to feel. So I want them to see what I see. I want them to feel secure. I want them to feel like I think they're sexy. I think they're handsome. I think they're strong. I just, you know what I mean? Like I'm into them. Otherwise, I wouldn't be there. And so I expect the people to be into them. And I always like to send them off like, yeah, look at you, you're like your little heartbreak out there, you just it's just like, I think that when someone has that, they want you to, if someone comes from a good place and a healthy place, they would actually want you to feel beautiful, sexy, attractive. You know what I mean? They're not going to try and put you down.
No, exactly. And that's like that clear indicator of like that coming from that wounded space of insecurity, amongst other things, and control and wanting power.
Are there any other things that you'd want to add in terms of how we can recognize wounded, and I guess that wounded man is actually all these qualities actually transferred to women too. We can say that as well. It's actually interesting.
Absolutely. And I think it's kind of like the one that popped into my mind, which was interesting because as I sort of, I think we talked about this in the last podcast, I won't go into it too much, but like sort of attachment theory and like realizing that I had like a fear of abandonment. So I was attracting all these men that like, were replicating my fear.
Of course.
But then what happened as I began to kind of work through that, then something really strange happened, where I started meeting all these men who were like, it was too much too soon. And I feel like there's an element of unhealthiness there as well. Yeah. So it was like, I would meet a guy and we would go on 2 dates and he would be like, oh, you're the woman I want to marry. And I would be like, what? I've met you twice. Or like, kind of like on the 3rd date, like, oh, I'm in love with you. Can we like move in together? And kind of like the over the top, like the attaching too early.
Yeah. That's really early.
Yeah. That was really surprising to me because I'd never experienced it. I'd only ever experienced the opposite. And so I was like, what is going on here? And then I realized, that's kind of like the opposite spectrum of kind of like that attaching too early. And that's unhealthy as well.
Yeah, I do know that's the thing because I think there's a bit of there's a discernment in that. So I feel like I do feel like men, when they know really fast, like I know we like to say that women are emotional and guys are logical, but I find it's the opposite. When the more I sort of like done my inner work and and figure out what I want and the mistakes I made and that kind of stuff, I find that as a woman, I'm sort of a bit more on the cautious side. I take my time. I need to see certain qualities in a man that only time will tell. Yes. And it doesn't have to be that much time, by the way. Like, it's just, if you know what you're looking for, you can quickly decide, no, that's not someone for me. Like, he's inconsistent or whatever it is, right? But men are very emotional, I find, because they almost don't have this. Because that's the thing, we're going to go, because I want to go into what feminine energy is and what you feel feminine energy is. But I feel like I've sort of learned to have a lot more compassion for men, like healthy men. Even the ones who aren't, because, they have their own path to walk. And, I can't go out here judging them, So, but I think that I feel like the more I realize, the older I got and, I'm starting to be... I'm more attracted now to someone who's older than me, has a bit more there's this calmness. They have a different way of approaching things. And I realized that a lot of men, actually, good men, they're out there slaying dragons, doing jobs that, a lot of men are not doing work because they're passionate about it. They do it because is what they need to be doing. And they're good at it. And so it feels, and again, a lot of women we're in the same boat, right? But I feel I'm just getting compassion to the fact that I can see why they want to take a woman out. They want to be around this energy, that feminine energy, which we're going to go over shortly. But because it can feel really hard for men. They're out there. They cannot be emotional. They have to make decisions. They have to bring a certain amount of money. They have to do X, Y, Z. And it's like they want to have that softness, that safety around this woman, because we're in touch with our emotion. We have the vocabulary for emotions, right? But they haven't really, and I'm talking about, I'm 42, so I'm thinking of that kind of age group and above, right? Is that they haven't been nurtured to go and talk about feelings. Now we tell little boys that it's okay to cry, right? So it's different for them. But men my age and above, it's a bit of a different ball game, I feel. And so what was I saying? That is so I think that when they don't have this access really to the emotion as much, the minute we make them feel a certain way, it must feel really addictive. It must feel because imagine that you don't have this access, and all of a sudden you have access to this, someone's broken down this cement wall of the day-to-day grind, and all of a sudden they have this woman, and she's beautiful and she's confident and she's enjoying life, she's enjoying her meal, she loves, she loves puppies. I don't know, I'm making it, I know it may sound weird for some people, but there is that softness and that enjoying life and being nourished by little things, being, I'm taken aback by the beauty of a horse and the sunset, that kind of stuff. And maybe a lot of men don't have time for that shit. They don't know they can take time for that stuff, right? So I think when you're coming across that, it's like all of a sudden these emotions are being discovered by them being around us. And I can see why they may, I feel in my experience, men are faster at making those decisions than we are, because we are like, well, I'm used to these emotions. I'm used to this stuff. And I need to know that I'm safe with you, because when I'm attaching to you, I'm really going to attach to you, because my hormones are going to kick in, especially if we get intimate.
Yes.
My hormones are going to kick in and I'm not going to see clearly. So I need as much time as I can to pace this so I can see clearly who I'm dealing with. And once I know it's safe, we can then unify in some way. And then I can totally, succumb, what's the word? Succomber in French.
Succumb, yes.
Yeah, just surrender to you. Exactly. Surrender to this container that feels safe. But for us, when we've dated and we've been hurt and, that kind of stuff, it takes a bit more time, I feel. So, so maybe healthy men sometimes they can actually, they make the decision, but they may hold back. They'll hold back a little bit because they don't want to scare you, right? But
yeah.
But there's a difference between a man like that and someone who is love bombing you, right? Because all they do is words. Whereas the man who really is feeling you, he's going to be taking all of your time. He's going to make sure, what do you want? What makes you happy? What do you need? He's going to want to... A man who's healthy really wants to... And I don't mean in a financial way, but just make sure that you're okay. Spoil you emotionally, making sure that you're okay financially. Just all of these things. It's a whole thing. It's a wholesome thing.
Yes. And I think that I love that you named that, because that nuance is so important. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was recognizing, when you were talking about feminine energy, I'm going to use something I heard recently, and I'll cite the source I heard it from. She's a woman called Tori Washington. And she said, within your relationship if you're cis heterosexual woman with a man, being the muse and not the mother.
Well, oh my God, yes.
And that really landed with me as yes, this is exactly what my relationship feels like. And especially because I'm the older woman in our relationship, I don't want to go into mothering territory. So it's kind of yes, I want to be the muse. And that's how it felt like. For me, that's how it felt different with my husband, because he, like you say, he was kind of he told me later on that he was quite sure from the beginning, but it was more exactly like you say, making sure that I felt safe, making sure that my needs were met, making sure that we could build the relationship together. But with the love bombing that I had from some men, I didn't feel any of that. It was just these like empty gestures, and they were doing it from it felt like desperation because they wanted to trap me. And then in that space, I can't surrender if I'm feeling trapped.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's kind of like like exactly like we've been talking about this whole time, is having that container of safety so that we can surrender into our feminine, which is what like the masculine then feels inspired by.
And that, you know what, I love that you said muse, not mother, because you know that mother thing, because I wrote down what you were saying about earlier with, you know, I wrote like two things. It was about control and masculinity, and I thought, you know, when we're trying too hard, let's say, to please a guy that's not worthy of us, right, that doesn't have good intention towards us, it's part of like controlling outcome, right, which is a very masculine thing. And mothering comes in too. It's like, you know, I see, like, you know, there's this Facebook group I'm in, and I see this woman, she was saying how I don't understand why he's so angry. Like the guy, obviously the dynamic is bad, but I can also see what she's done wrong by reading it. Like she was saying how, you know, this man, you know, I don't know why he's shouting at me, which is obviously terrible. But like she was saying, you know, I mean, I took out money from my pension saving for him to be able to afford the custody of his kids. I help him with this. I pay for this, and I was like, you're his mum. Mm-hmm. You're basically his mum right there. And that's why he's resenting you. And I'm not saying this is right. He shouldn't be talking to her the way he does. But it's about this accountability, which actually the next thing I wanted to go about, the accountability. It's like, it's all very well to be complaining and go, why is he doing this? Why is he doing that? But the thing is, when you're like, she was even saying like he was supposed to fix a shelf. And he says, oh, I think his hammer was broken, or whatever it was. Some tool in the toolbox was broken. And she was like, oh, well, do you need me to go and buy one? And then he snapped at her. And I'm like, yeah, because that's what a mum would say. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to have sex or be married to their own mum. Yes. Right? It's like, it's really off-putting. And that's why he's being angry, because he doesn't know it. He doesn't have the vocabulary or the awareness to say it. Neither does she. But I was reading it and I didn't comment on it because I was like, this is like therapy area. Like I don't have the qualification. But it's like, and I could be wrong, right? But the thing is, it's like, don't let him fix that shelf. If the hammer is broken, if he's a man of his own word, he'll go and get a new hammer. Like, leave him alone. And if he's not doing it, if he consistently does not do what he says he's going to do, now you know what you're dealing with. Give them the chance to show you, to reveal to you who they are in this relationship to you. Because if they are not consistent, if they keep like love bombing, right? That's like at the beginning of the relationship, where they just say words. It was putting you off. You were aware something wasn't quite right, because words are cheap. But what you didn't do, you didn't say, oh, do you want me to go and choose the ring for you? You didn't say that, right? But that's what she's doing. That's kind of what she's doing. Yes. She's taking over. And that's which is very difficult, because we are independent women. I'm an independent woman. And it's really, I have to be really conscious of the fact that, oh, I can't be safe around a man. 2, he actually wants to protect me. A good man, right? Yes. And I think that's the thing about being accountable, that we cannot, if we're the mother, we are responsible for his bad reactions too. Because a kid is going to play up. Yes.
Yeah, I love all of that. And it's so, as in, you know, it completely makes sense. And it's kind of that, for me, it was like the difference when I was able to surrender into my feminine energy is when, okay, so I had my goal of I wanted to get married. I knew that I wasn't available for just like dating for like years and then whatever. So I had my goal. And then in the beginning, when I met my husband, like, you know, I did make it clear quite early on that I wanted that. And then afterwards, I just let it go. And then he was the one who, he told me that he loved me first, and he was the one who proposed, and he was the one who kind of like brought it all forward, because I needed like that safe container, and I needed to know that he was on board for that as well. So, and it was kind of like, but if I hadn't have had that safe container, I would have felt the need to control the outcome.
Right,
I would have felt like I had to keep reminding him every 3 months, hey, remember I said I want to get married? Like,
I know.
And propose.
And say, you know, this is the diamond cut I like. You know what I mean? Like, don't... like, and just keep saying and pushing and pushing. And the thing is, and I know it's difficult because we are out here, we're in this era. I don't know how can I ask how old you are, Joey? I know you're younger than me, I think, right?
I'm 33.
33, okay. So so this may be relevant to you as well. I don't know, but like to me it's like, I grew up with like, you're a dependent woman, you make your own way, you pay your own bills, you blah blah blah, you don't rely on a man. It wasn't said to me in those words, it was just shown to me, right? Because my mom's a single mom, it was obvious she was in charge of she had to be the mom and the dad, right? So she was in charge. And I think it's like, so it is like we need to not be so hard on ourselves, because we are going to trip up. I am going to trip up next time I'm in, next time I'm, when I'm dating and stuff. It's like, I'm going to trip up. But the thing is, it's like, just be aware of it, pull yourself back. And there is a little mantra you can have, which is something I said with Priska and Baz when they were on the show, different episodes. And it was just like, when they were explaining to me about dynamics between men and women, and I was just like, wait a minute, is it like they just want like men are a bit like little boys? They want it to be their idea first, and they laughed. It was just like, it's almost like, just remember, he wants it to be his idea. You can tell him what you want. You can tell him what you want. He wants you to know. He wants to know, actually, because he wants to be able to give you what you want, right? It's like when you buy a gift to someone, you want to know what they like. You don't want them to tell, like, let's say if you're my best friend, if you tell me you've got to buy me the new Kenzo bag, whatever it is, right? Nickel Fairy bag. And I'll be like, oh, that's really off-putting. But if you told me during the year, if I say, oh, what do you like? You say, oh, I really like that bag, and I really love that piece and that this, and oh, I love that shampoo, whatever it is, right? And I have some ideas. You may even have said it to me because I know you. So I probably know what you like, and then I'll buy it for you, and I get the pleasure of seeing the look on your face when you open the bag, right? They open the present. And I think it's a bit that, just remember that you may tell him that you want marriage, but then just let it go, because effectively he needs, you want to make sure he's on board.
Exactly. And and it's kind of like something that I see come up with a lot of women, especially who are very conscious and into self-development, is I always hear, they're in otherwise very happy, healthy relationships, but then they're like, oh, but my partner isn't interested, my husband isn't interested in like personal development, and I feel like I'm the one doing all the work and he's not doing anything. And I'm just like, well, it's a different path, right? And that's when we go back to like being the muse. Because then it's like, well, if you're doing all of your inner work and your personal development and you're showing him who you are and who you can become, then that's going to like inspire him, instead of you saying, well, you need to read this book, or you need to do this course, or you need to whatever. But if you're just staying in your lane and then doing it for yourself, and then he can like feel inspired by the possibility, that's much more kind of like, that's much more of a flow then. And in this way, what I have seen in my own relationship and with clients I work with, men do operate a little bit differently. It's kind of like they don't necessarily, and especially when it's kind of like, if it's not broken, why fix it, right? So it's kind of like they don't want to do like all of that work if there's no like issue in the relationship. So it's kind of like just recognizing we are in some ways wired differently, whether that's through conditioning, whether that's the way we're brought up, and it's kind of, and whether it's through the energies that we embody, but we all embody masculine and feminine energy. Some of us will be either more in our masculine or more in our feminine, and it doesn't really have to do necessarily with gender, but it's just kind of knowing if you're someone who's more in your feminine energy and you're with a partner who's more in their masculine energy, their way of showing love is going to be very different to what you might want or expect.
Yeah, let's go and define that a little bit, feminine and masculinity, because it has nothing to do with gender, absolutely. The thing I wanted to say just before we go into that is that, let's say if a guy is a bit reticent to change because, don't fix what's broken, it's also because, like you said, we are wired differently. And I think they feel a lot of responsibility when they're in a relationship with us, when they love us. They feel responsible. There's that deep thing where they feel responsible. If you're not happy, they're like, what did I do wrong? If you're mad, what did I do wrong? You know, they're just like, they feel, so it's almost like that, feel like, well, wait, if we change something and I don't know what it is, like we start to go and do some inner work or self-development, but then what's going to happen to us, like this safety net I've put around us, I've put this band around us, and then you're trying to stretch it, but I'm not in control. It's almost like if he'd said to you, let's say you're used to wearing tampons when you have your moon cycle, and then he's the one saying you should wear a moon cup. My body, I don't know. Exactly. Like the idea shouldn't be coming from him, really. Like he may say, "Hey, have you seen? I saw these moon cups. Do you know about those?" Like I don't mind. He can bring it to your awareness and say, "Oh, did you see that? There's some moon cups. That's like eco-friendly or whatever, And you'll be like, okay. And then he lets it go. He's not going to say every day, moon cup. I bought you some moon cups. Try the moon cup. There's different sizes. Have you had a baby? No. Okay, try this size. Do you know what I mean? Like, you'll be like, back off. And I think that's why a little bit with that, like if you're in self-development or whatever it is that you're doing, you can tell him what you're doing. That's fine. It's okay for him to know. But say, you should really join the 7:30 class on every Monday. He's going to resent you.
Yeah.
And not because but not because he disagrees. It's just because it's like he feels like he has to now. He's obliged. So I want to go into like what feminine energy means to you, and then I'll say what I feel it means to me. So because we talked a lot about feminine, masculine, and maybe people are worried, they're confused and thinking maybe that's to do with gender or not gender. So can you explain like what does being in our feminine energy mean to you?
I love that you're asking that question, because I do think everyone defines it differently, like what being feminine means, and it is so individual and it's so nuanced, and it's so important to like name. It's so valuable for us to get clear on what it means for each of us as individuals. And so for me, feminine energy, it's when I'm in my feminine energy, it's actually a lot of what we've talked about around surrender. So it's when I'm in a space of safety, or there's been enough safety created around me, or I've created it for myself, to a point where I'm able to surrender and let go of outcomes.
Oh, I want the same.
Yes, where I'm not like controlling, right? And where I am allowing myself to be held and supported. And so an example, and when you were saying earlier about like, growing up having been taught to be an independent woman and not depend on anyone financially, like I had that upbringing as well. And for me, it's been very challenging this year, because both me and my husband went self-employed just before the pandemic started. And he's a tradesman, he's a carpenter, so his work is always in demand. And like, I'm a coach, so it's a bit more of a luxury right now. So he's been able to build financially much more quicker than I have. So he's been supporting me financially as well, which is something that I haven't been used to in a relationship. And I noticed that he did feel that kind of like responsibility, and I was making that bad in my mind. I was like, oh no, he's gonna feel pressure, or oh, I have to make more money because otherwise like he's gonna feel resentful of me. And I was creating all these stories in my head, none of which were true. It was just that he wanted me to be able to keep going with the work that I was doing, because he knew how important it is to me, and not to have to go back to corporate or like go back to another job or whatever it is. And to kind of like, and when I realized that, I was able to surrender and like let go of the outcome of like, okay, like I can trust him, he's got this. And it doesn't mean, I'm not independent, or I can't like take care of myself, but like we're in a partnership. We're married. Exactly. So like he gets to support me in that way. And maybe in 10 years time, like, I don't know, like the tables will turn, or it'll be different, or in a few years time. And that's okay as well.
Exactly.
So, and I had to it was really an exercise in conscious surrender for me, of being able to surrender and say, it's okay. It doesn't make you any less of a partner or any less of a woman, or like that I get to surrender that and just let go of the outcome.
Yeah, and I think like in terms of like, I like to add the contrast with masculinity, because, like you were saying earlier, feminine and masculine energy is not gender related. So for example, I can go from my feminine, I'll explain what I mean by feminine energy, but first I want to say that I can go from my feminine to my masculine several times in the same day. So, being in my masculine is, like I mentioned before, making sure that my bills are set up so that the payment is done automatically from my bank account. I don't have to worry that. That's making sure that I can stay and I can live in the place I'm in. I'm making sure that's more of a control thing and it's a doing thing. So there is like the bills, making sure that I can, that I have my shopping list when I do my grocery shopping, right? Because otherwise I'm going to go into the shop, buy half of the stuff I don't need, and the other half I'm going to forget the basics, like buying better. So I have to have my shopping list. That's how I feel. That's the masculine side of like controlling. It's like if I have 10 items I need to buy, I also know I'm within my budget. I'm not buying anything I don't need if I don't have the budget for it, right? If it's a tight month. So that's the masculine side. Like going to work, making sure things are done, making decisions. That's more of the masculine side is how I feel. So being in my feminine, so a lot of it's going to similar to what you said. So I'm just going to read out what I wrote. I wrote something down before we met. I was, okay, so what does it mean to me? And I wrote down, not trying to control the outcomes. So there's no shopping list, right? I'm not trying to control the budget. So not trying to control the outcome, to relax. And for that to happen, I need to have certain things in place, like as an independent single woman, like anything from having my bills paid, grocery shopping list, that kind of stuff. So I don't get overwhelmed or worried and anxious about, can I afford my shopping? Can I pay my rent? So I don't get overwhelmed and that I don't forget things. So I have to have those things in place, like automation almost, if you like. And so what feminine is when I'm dating a man, for me to be in my feminine, to relax and not trying to control outcome and decide everything like I'm his mom, I need to feel relaxed around him and know that if I let him lead, he won't drive me into a ditch. So when I feel that energy from a man, and I can see this in his actions and in his decision making, I can sit back, I can relax and be the girl I love to be in a safe environment, because then I can really just be girly. I can enjoy the food that we're having. I can enjoy going for a walk with him. I can enjoy all of these things. And now even within a relationship, sometimes we can both be in the masculine, which is something that David Dada, I heard David Dada mention many, many years. This is like over 10 years ago, so I may completely be butchering what he said. But this is a rough rephrase. Is that, let's say if you have joint finances, like when you're married and you need to talk about renovation of the house, you're both going to be a bit in your masculine. You both, or paying bills, you both have to, or it's maybe more neutral because you're both going, okay, so what do we need to set up? Okay, do we need to set up like a direct debit for this thing? Do we need to do this? Do we need to do that? Are we going to buy a brown sofa or a blue sofa? What are we going to do? And so and sometimes you're going to be, let's say if he's sick and you need to look after him, you're going to be more of the masculine because you're there mothering him a bit, not trying to mother him, but you're looking after him. You may be taking the kids to school because he's at home, he's sick, he broke his foot. I mean, touch wood, nothing that's going to happen. But you know what I'm saying? So that it does vary. But in general, when I really enjoy being in my feminine, and I didn't used to really do that. I didn't do that. I was very controlling of my own behavior, people pleasing and that kind of stuff. And that's very controlling. And it's not honest. It's not genuine. Whereas we can be relaxed and I can just be the full woman that I am in that moment with him. Is very delicious and it's very fun and it's fun for him too. But it will vary. You can just go from feminine to masculine, right? But that to me, I need to know that he's not going to drive us into a ditch. That's a very important feeling, because if I feel he's driving us into a ditch, I've been on dates like that and I'm literally there deciding everything and I don't enjoy it. I hate it. I realize I absolutely hate it because I feel like I have to control it because he's not. Even when we were walking, I remember this guy, we were walking in the park and I'm like, we're walking towards this tree. I could see it and he was just la 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 and I just had to go like, should we? Oh yeah. And I was like, oh, it was icky. I was like, icky, I can't trust you. This is fucking weird. But it's not just that one thing. It was everything. He was like that. Do you know what I mean? Everything.
Yeah. And I think it's really important, like you say, to note that there is fluctuations. So even if you are predominantly in your feminine energy, or if you identify as that energy, there are going to be moments where it's healthy and it's required for you to be in your masculine energy.
Right.
And I think in most healthy relationships, it will fluctuate as needed and as necessary. And we're not both always staying in one energy, because that would kind of like go into, just like overcompensating or kind of like attached to a certain identity. So it's kind of like just being really mindful that it is a balance, that most people identify more with one energy than the other, but that it is interchanging all the time. And as the dynamics are always like shifting, and just having like that awareness and just being, I think it just gives permission. Yeah. It just gives permission, because then we know, okay, like, and not saying, I'm not a fan of like the outdated sort of polarity teachings, which are a little bit, very like gender based, but just recognizing the parts of these energies that we do want to embody and how they serve us and support us in relationship.
Yeah, and and even like you saying that polarity, I mean, it happens. I mean, that feminine, masculine, I can feel it even with different girlfriends of mine. Like friendships that I have with them. That sometimes I'm more masculine and they're more feminine, and vice versa, and it will change. So it really is not gender based, and some men. But I think it's like realizing I realize what my preference is. Yes. I much prefer when I am with a man, when I'm dating a man, right? When it's not friendship, when it's actually romantic. I much prefer being in my feminine more than being in my masculine. Like I feel it's also a feeling. It's a vibration I can feel. I feel I'm basking in this different kind of energy aura around me. It's like a bubble. It's the only way I can describe it. And so I much prefer, I need to be with someone who's going to be more masculine. It's going to be masculine more of the time and me more feminine more of the time. Yes. But if I was purely masculine, if I was a lot more masculine, if I was someone who just had to be more in my masculine energy, then being with a man who's more feminine energy would work, right? Because it's it's like a magnet, it's polarity. Yes. And so there's nothing wrong with it. But I think it's that self-awareness, accountability, like know that if that's how you enjoy being most, then find a partner that's going to reflect that, be compatible for that. We're not there trying to be the Clash of the Titans, right? That's not fun. But so I wanted to ask you something, because I think it's very important to understand when we talk about not letting go of outcome and surrendering and being in flow. It's very important also to just point out that just because you're in flow and you're in your feminine energy, you can still get angry. Like, I think, I think that's very, you can put your foot down. And I just want to check, like, is there a way you would say that you've seen with clients or with yourself, like, is there a way, how do we consolidate in our mind that we are feminine and we are surrendering, but then we also it's okay to also show the more fierce side sometimes. Like, how do we consolidate that in our mind? And is there a way to do that? And is there a way to, like, is there a way because we can be angry from love? Like, sometimes I see certain cultures are much better at it than others. Some cultures, they're like, she's like losing her shit, right, in a very sexy way, and the guy is like, he's actually really loving it. And he's like, wow, because he doesn't just want to see, I think just like we don't want a man who's just pushover. They don't want to see a woman who's a pushover. I think there is strength in staying our ground, was being feminine, right? So like sometimes I'm looking at these cultures, like they lose their shit and it's like so sexy and feminine, but you can see they're coming from a place of, they're not trying to destroy the guy, they're not trying to diminish him, but it's just, they're showing their fury, which is, very good. It's like a good Ferrari. Ferrari is beautiful and elegant, but then, vroom, the engine comes up, right?
Yes. Yeah, I think for me, it's really, it goes back to like what we define as being feminine. So for me, when I'm in my feminine, I'm embracing the spectrum of all of my emotions. And that includes like anger, that includes grief, that includes joy and pleasure. And I'm not like making any, because what we've done in our society is we kind of make a lot of these emotions wrong. and we like gender them. We say, you know, women shouldn't get angry, or like, you know, like, I don't know, or women who cry are like dramatic or whatever, you know, like all of this kind of stuff. And for me, being in my feminine means I'm expressing my emotions healthily. And for me, that really means just being in touch with them, because so many of us aren't even in touch with our emotions to be able to express them, because we've just like numbed them out. So it's kind of like recognizing, I mean, there's a lot of things I'm angry about right now in the world that are going on, like a lot of things.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, obviously I can't let it consume me, because otherwise I couldn't do anything. But it's kind of like, an example for me is I have a lot of, you know, debates with my partner about like, you know, women's rights and like sexism and like what's going on in the world. And he isn't like displaying those behaviors, but I do point them out to him when I see them.
Yeah.
Or when I see people he knows doing it, or when I like whatever. And in that moment, I'm expressing my anger, and it's like righteous anger. And it's like, and I'm entitled to express that. And he's able to like hold the space for that. Or if it's in like a situation where we're having a conflict, and it's kind of like, you know, me expressing my rage in that moment, like what's going on, or the situation, without kind of like, but taking like responsibility for my emotions, right? And I think that's really like the key. It's like, how are you expressing it? How are you expressing it, and are you doing it from an anchored and an integrated and embodied space, rather than like just from like reactivity?
I think there's probably, and again, I'm still trying to find that out, but I feel like maybe, you know, I think I must have heard this somewhere, but it's like, you know, I think there's different ways. It's like when we're fighting, right? It's if we're having an argument. In the same way as like if we're angry, right? As if like you said, you're angry about the state of affairs in the world, and you're expressing that. You know, you can express that, but then there will be a difference if you then start to insult him because he's a man, right?
Yes.
And you say, you men are all and this, and then you're part of the problem, and then you are despicable, and you are, and then, you know, and so loads of like bad words, right? And because then you're attacking him, and then you can't even have a conversation anymore, right? No. So it's like, if you're angry and you say, I'm really frustrated, like, you know, this is really painful, or whatever it is, or this really upsets me, and it angers me, and, you know, and I don't know how we can fix this or whatever. But, you know, and again, I don't know if that's the way to do it, but like, I think there's definitely a difference. I think in the same way, like, we can show, like, if you're angry at him about something, right, as a couple, let's say if we leave the state of affairs to one side, but say as a couple, if you're fighting and you're angry at him, it's still feminine to be angry, but I think but then it gets really then it's ugly if we start to, same thing, if he did that to us and he start to insult us and insult our character and saying that we are scum or whatever, you know what I mean? You know, it wouldn't fly, you know what I mean? So I think same thing for them, you know, if we start to say, you know, you're disgusting, and you know, you're disgusting because you've got outside plumbing, you know what I mean? I don't know, it's just so I think there's a way of doing it, right? That's more in respect to ourselves, how we respect ourselves and how we respect the other person.
Exactly, yes, exactly, that hits the nail on the head for me, definitely.
So, you know, thank you so much. I'm really enjoying this conversation with you, and I just want to check in and see, like, is there anything that you feel that maybe you didn't get a chance to say? Is there anything that you'd like to add to the topic that we've covered? Is there anything else?
Yeah, so one thing that came up for me is we talked a lot about the emotional aspect of being in relationship with the masculine and the feminine energy. And I wanted to touch on how that comes up in our sexuality and in sex as well. So if we're looking at it from an angle of, you know, a cis heterosexual woman with a cis man, and kind of like looking at it from that space of, for me, I really found everything that we've been talking about really translated over into sex for me, and being able to surrender there. Because for a really long time with the partners I was with, I didn't feel emotionally safe. And then when it came to like being in the bedroom, I wasn't able to surrender there either, because I was just always on my guard. And so it was kind of like for me, it was really, really important with a partner. I found that like the partners that I have had emotional safety with, I was able to then surrender and have pleasure and actually enjoy sex as well.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think, I mean, definitely as a woman, if you don't feel safe, and again, it doesn't mean that we're not fearing for our life. That's not what I mean. But like, it's like we were talking before, like those microaggressions, it sort of rips, like erode the safety, and and when we're at our most vulnerable, and it's a very vulnerable moment to be intimate with a man, right? So, if there's a lion that comes through the door, we're not in that space to be able to defend ourselves. So it's that whole, I guess, again, that safety, the image of safety. And yeah, it makes sense. If you're not safe in that relationship, you're not going to feel safe in that bedroom with him.
Yeah, and it goes back to kind of, the example earlier where I was saying like the guy who would make like those kind of like, subtle comments about my weight. Like I couldn't have sex with him with the lights on. Like I just couldn't do it because I was like, he's going to like be, micro inspecting my body and like pointing out like all of my flaws and I just couldn't do it. And it was such a big thing. And, now where I am, like, in a relationship where I feel safe and I feel like, my partner's attracted to me and all the things, like, I'm quite happy to, like, be in broad daylight and just, like, walk around naked and not, like, have to worry about it at all. And that really allows me to, for me, that's, like, being in my feminine energy and, like, surrendering because I don't have to, like, have my guard up.
But that's definitely a big indicator, isn't it? How we feel when we are, sexual with our partner. Because... like there's this old expression that's been around for a very long time. It's like, if sex is going well, the relationship is going well. If sex isn't going well, the relationship is in trouble. Mm-hmm. There's almost like there's this unspoken, all these unspoken things are showing, or can be. It doesn't have to be that doesn't have to be the only reason why sex isn't going well. It could be other things, of course. But it's just that it's often an indicator of how the relationship is going. It's almost like a temperature check sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And when sometimes when I'm working with women who are in marriages where they don't have sex anymore, it's because like that safety has been like eroded over time, or where there's just been so many incidences of like boundaries being crossed or whatever it might be, that they don't even feel safe engaging in that way together anymore.
Yeah, because we need to be able to relax.
Yeah.
So if you don't feel safe, you can't relax and game over.
Exactly. Yeah, so I just wanted to touch on that as well, because I really do think it impacts every aspect of the relationship.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Joey. Thank you. So I'm just gonna go with the finishing thoughts, which are the same two questions I ask all my guests, and I'd be curious to see if your answer is different than last. Is there so the first one is, what do you wish you'd realized at 18?
I think what I wish I'd realized when I was 18 is that it's okay to be myself.
Yeah.
And that I don't have to like hide or like pretend to be someone I'm not, or like perform. That it's okay to be myself, and the people that are right for me, that they will meet me there.
Yeah.
And that includes being in the full expression of my feminine energy.
And the second question is, what stuff do you not put up with anymore?
Yeah, I think things that I don't put up with anymore are other people trying to make me feel small. So I kind of have really good boundaries with that. And it's a funny example the other day, because we're living in my hometown at the moment, so like where I grew up. And I was like walking with my husband, and I bumped into like this ex-partner, and he was like shouting my name on the street. And then I was like, yeah, this is my husband, like introducing me. And I could tell he was like trying to make me feel small. By like his body language and the way he was like talking, and just like the whole like conversation. And I was just like, in this moment, I'm not going to allow you to make me feel small. Like I was really, like in my own body language, like grounding myself and just being like, you are not going to take me out of like my centeredness. and kind of like try and throw me off. So I think that was something that came up for me recently, where I was like, yeah, this is the type of behavior I don't allow in my life anymore.
And you see what else happened as well? I feel like this is what I hear when you said that, is that because his behavior, hasn't changed. His behavior is what it is, but you didn't allow him to make you feel that way. So it's almost like, people can't make us feel anything that we're not feeling ourselves, about ourselves, or that we are not letting them feel about ourselves. So it's like, with sex shaming, for example. If you don't feel ashamed about it, no one's going to make you feel ashamed. Right? If you're not worried, if you're not ashamed about your body, no one's going to make you feel ashamed. They can't let you unless you have, they can't make you feel that way if you healed. It doesn't mean it's nice to hear. It doesn't mean that it allows them, but it's not so much about allowing their behavior. It's more about how we feel. And, because someone may say something to me and it may destroy me because it hits a core belief. And that same person says the same to you. And for you, it's like, oh, you didn't even hear it, because it's like, it's nothing. And so a lot of it also is a reflection of what we believe, our unconscious belief and our conscious ones as well, right? So, I mean, that's, that was a great example, because he was acting a certain way that would have made you feel different 20 years ago, maybe. But now you're standing in your full self without having to what's the word? There's a word for it. Without rocking your own boat.
Yeah, exactly. And that was really powerful for me to experience, and also to see, like, exactly like you say, like how far I've come to where, like, I can regulate myself so that this person isn't like taking me away from myself through their behavior.
Yeah, I love that. That's a lot of accountability for our own well-being. So, Jerry, can you please tell us where we can find you? How can people work with you? Give us all the good stuff.
Yes, so the best place to get all the information is my website, which is jerrysouter.com. So it's just like first name, last name.com. And I'm offering one-on-one coaching at the moment. And I do like a sort of taster empowerment and pleasure session, which is free, which you can book on the website. And I'm also on Instagram, the Jerry Souter, and I have a Facebook group called the Conscious Intimacy Club, where I share a lot of really valuable content in there as well. So they're like the main spaces.
Thank you so much, Jerry. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being part of the show. And, I can't wait to see what's next for you. And thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me on again.
Bye.
Bye.
And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com, or come and find me on Instagram at Tool for Dish It Podcast. See you next week, and until then,
Using health inappropriately.